My name is Sophia. I'm just an ordinary woman like anyone else who will turn 65 this year. Well, perhaps it's better to say I'm a grandma already. Let me tell you a bit about my past. I grew up in a fatherless home. According to my mother, my father passed away in an accident before I was born. But having my mother, I never felt lonely. Despite being poor, having my beloved mother made me happy. Then, the greatest misfortune of my life struck me. Mom, my mother fell ill and suddenly departed, joining my father. Why did you leave me alone and go off on your own? I don't know how much I cried. But no matter how much I cried, my mother didn't come back. At the age of 13, I was left orphaned and placed in a facility. And I decided not to continue to high school, but to start working. Of course, the teachers at the facility recommended that I go to high school. But I wanted to live on my own as soon as possible, with my own strength. That feeling was strong. I wanted to stand on my own feet rather than rely on others for money. I was anxious about starting work after junior high school, but somehow things worked out once I started working. I led busy days every day, and before I knew it, I was approaching 65. There were many things that happened over the 50 years in the metalworking industry. Firstly, major life events such as marriage and children. I got married at the age of 25 and gave birth to my son the following year. My son, who is almost 40 now, is already married and lives far away from home. Seeing his face once a year would be enough. Well, the fact that he's not relying on us is a sign of his health, so I'm sure he's doing fine. In about 3 months, I will retire. Maybe I'll go visit my son for a while. Or perhaps I'll take a leisurely trip. While nurturing such thoughts, I eagerly awaited retirement day. But now, I have a little problem. I'm home. When I came back from work, my husband Joseph was sprawled on the sofa watching TV. The room was still messy, and my husband seemed irritated as usual. Hey, Sophia, is dinner ready yet? I'm starving. Yes, I'm preparing it now. But what were you doing today? When I asked, my husband angrily threw away the horse racing newspaper he was holding. I lost $500 again. That horse and jockey are hopeless. They even fell off. Oh, you lost again. I sighed at my husband's behavior. I've seen this scene so many times before. The sight of my husband taking it out on me every time he gambles and loses. You're wasting such a large sum of money again. Just because you're retired and have free time doesn't mean you should spend it all like this. Please stop spending money only on these things. Shut up. Don't order me around like you're the husband. Enough. I feel sick. With that, my husband spat out those words and left the house. My husband retired just 6 months ago. Since he had retired from a job he had held for almost 40 years, I had no complaints about him spending his relaxing time while I was at work. But after retirement, my husband started gambling on poker, slots, horse racing, boat races, every kind of gambling imaginable. Even when he was working, he sometimes gambled a bit with his spare cash, saying it was just for socializing. But now, he's become obsessed with gambling every day, spending money like water. He wasn't that kind of person, but certainly it was up to my husband to decide how he wanted to spend his retirement time. But money is different. To ease the anxiety about life after retirement, it's important to save money, even if it's just a little. And when it comes to needing care or support later on, money is still what's needed in advance. Why doesn't my husband understand this importance? Since my husband suddenly left the house, I reluctantly had dinner alone. It's like dealing with a rebellious teenager, even though he's an old man. After about 2 hours, my husband came back, giggling and slightly tipsy. Did he spend his money on gambling again this time? How many times has it been today? I sighed and sat in front of my husband. Hey, can't you reconsider how you spend money a little? If you continue like this, our retirement will be full of worries. We need to maintain a solid financial foundation, or we'll end up bankrupt.
If you're so concerned about budgeting, why don't you handle it yourself? Don't abandon your own job.
That's not the point. I'm just pointing out your wasteful spending. How much do you think you've spent on gambling? When I checked my husband's bank book, more than $30,000 had disappeared in just 6 months. That's why I want him to stop and reconsider his spending habits now. I thought so, but
I can recover it if I try. You're always nagging.
My husband completely ignored me. If you could recover it, wouldn't the gambling organizers lose money? My husband, who loses in the range of tens of thousands, has no talent for gambling. He must know that himself, but my husband remains obstinate.
I'm investing. It'll all come back big one day.
And he didn't budge from his stance. As conflicts over money increased between us, our conversations dwindled. That wasn't all. My husband started spending more time away from home. He used to come back by 10 p.m. at the latest, but lately, he often didn't return until after midnight. The gap between us as a couple was definitely widening. Talking only made my husband irritable, and I was exhausted from dealing with his incomprehensible behavior. But with my own retirement approaching, I was busy with handovers and farewell visits. Honestly, I didn't have the energy to think about my husband. But I couldn't just leave our relationship like this. Continuing this lifestyle might lead to bankruptcy for real. At the very least, I had to protect my retirement savings. And then, the day of my retirement arrived.
Sophia, thank you for all your hard work. Now, enjoy your time relaxing with your husband.
Thank you, everyone. I truly appreciate everything. I was presented with a luxurious bouquet and received a big round of applause from my colleagues, marking the end of my 50 years of service. Saying goodbye to the company where I had spent over 70% of my life was indeed lonely. I gently wiped away tears as I left the company and returned home with a refreshed feeling. To my surprise, my husband, who is usually not at home, greeted me warmly at the door.
Sophia, today is your retirement day, isn't it?
His eyes were different from usual, gleaming with an unusual intensity. I had a bad feeling about this. Yes it is. I tried to steer the conversation away from anything contentious, but my husband insisted that I sit in the living room and began to speak.
Sophia, leave this house. It's the homeowner's command.
Huh? What are you suddenly saying?
This house is mine. Both the ownership and the mortgage payments, so kicking you out is easy. You've been nagging about how people spend money. You'll be getting your retirement money, right? Then you're no longer needed. Leave your money and disappear from my sight.
I never imagined being told such a thing on the day of my retirement. Afterward, my husband continued to express his dissatisfaction with me. In essence, he was frustrated with not being able to spend money as he pleased every day, so he wanted to get rid of his bothersome wife.
Who allowed you to work until today? It's because I allowed you to work, right? Even the retirement money you got, wasn't it because of me?
What an absurd argument. I wonder if his brain melted from excessive gambling.
Anyway, get out right now. I won't accept any arguments. If necessary, I'll take this to court or something. Disappear from my sight right now.
There were countless things I wanted to say, but it was useless to speak to my husband, who was completely agitated. Regarding the ownership of the house, he was right, and my husband had managed all the payments since the construction of the house. But to be suddenly confronted with such cold words, as if cutting off the relationship abruptly after 40 years of being together, the feeling of emptiness seemed more appropriate than sadness when considering the weight of those 40 years. I didn't want to think about anything anymore. To think that such a betrayal awaited me on the day of my retirement. That day, I packed my belongings and left the house without hesitation. I'll come to pick up the big things later. Farewell. My husband didn't say anything when I left. Marriages are fragile things, aren't they? Tears streamed down my cheeks. However, just 1 month later, the tables turned completely. It all started when I was lost in thought while gazing at the sea. Suddenly, my phone rang. I ignored it at first after seeing the number, but it rang again. You're so persistent. Hello?
Sophia, where are you right now?
It's been a long time since I heard my husband's yelling. It almost feels nostalgic. The Bahamas, but
I knew it. Going on vacation alone in the tropics, leaving your husband behind? What trash.
It turns out that my husband's phone had an international calling feature, so when he dialed my number, it played a message saying, "You are making an international call."
Where did you get the money for that? Your retirement money hasn't been deposited into your account yet. What's going on?
Apparently, my husband had been diligently going to the bank every day to update my bank book. However, seeing no change in the balance, he found it suspicious and decided to call. Listen, I never said anything about giving you my retirement money.
Huh?
You told me to leave in such an angry manner, so I just followed your instructions. I never mentioned anything about the retirement money.
But you left your bank book on the living room table. I assumed it was for me to update it when your retirement money came.
Ah, that bank book. I had accidentally left an old one at home. It should have had a balance of only 12 cents, but my husband had been taking it to the bank every day. It's laughable to imagine. What nonsense are you talking about? That's impossible. To prevent you from abusing it, I ensured that the retirement money would be transferred to me.
Huh? What?
My husband was surprised by my words, but continued to assert his claim.
But as a married couple, I should have the right to it.
Sure, I agree. Shall we have one last discussion as a married couple then?
Last? What do you mean?
What is he trying to play dumb about now? Listen, you tried to kick me out and take away my retirement money, just to suit your own convenience. And you think I wouldn't consider a divorce in that situation? Don't underestimate me. When I said that, my husband fell silent. I'll contact you later about the divorce. Goodbye. As I was about to hang up the phone.
Wait a minute.
He sounded desperate. What now?
I need you to transfer some money. There's nothing left in my account.
What? You used up all our savings? When I asked, my husband fell silent again on the other end of the line. It seems my husband, now without me as a stopper, had poured all his money into gambling like water, leaving himself completely broke. It had only been a month since I left. I wondered what kind of life my husband had been living during that time. It was so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh. To spend all that money you had? You must have a talent for it. And I guess I'm good at crisis avoidance, too. It was a good idea to arrange for my retirement money to be transferred elsewhere just in case. I'm really glad I did that. My son looked at me with puzzled expression as I clutched my phone.
Mom, what's going on? Who are you talking to?
Dad, listen to this. He gambled away all our retirement money and family savings. Isn't it absurd?
What?
My son was furious at my words. He snatched the phone and started lecturing his father. A hopeless husband and a reliable son. I wonder who he takes after. I was undecided about what to do for a few days after leaving home. Fortunately, my company expedited the procedure for paying out my retirement money, so I had cash on hand. All I needed was a place to calm my mind. I decided to rely on my son and his wife, who live in the Bahamas, for a while. When I explained the situation to them, they sympathized deeply and graciously agreed to take me in. So I spent some leisure time in the Bahamas with my son and his wife, planning to return to the U.S. after a while. I am so glad that my husband did not get my retirement money. After my son finished his lecture, I dropped the second bomb. You receive documents from the lawyer soon, regarding the money you love so much? My husband sounded relieved when I said this.
What? Are you talking about the money you owe me? I'm ready for it.
He seemed relieved, as if he had misunderstood something. Since it seemed like he still hadn't grasped the situation, I explained it to him. Certainly, retirement funds are subject to asset division, but think about it carefully. You gambled away the family's money. I'll make sure that portion is deducted properly. Now, will there be any of your share left? I wonder. My husband's life had surpassed its limit. There's hardly anything left now.
Sophia, I'm sorry. How could I? I'll change, I'll stop gambling, and I'll cherish money from now on. So
what?
Can you lend me some money for one last gamble?
Oh, no way. Listening to my husband's hopeless words, I quietly hung up the phone. Later, I returned home and officially divorced my husband. He resisted until the end, but he no longer had any veto power. The misused living expenses were almost offset by the property division to him, leaving him with literally nothing but a drop in the bucket.
What am I supposed to do now to live?
The clinging voice of my husband echoes emptily. Well, you have a place to live, and you'll receive a pension, right? If it's not enough, then you should work.
Work again?
Afterward, my husband quickly found a part-time job and started working, but he couldn't quit gambling in the end, and his earnings quickly ran out. It seems he's shut out from borrowing money from friends or relatives. No one will help such a gambling addict. Well, it's his own fault, so I won't sympathize at all. I've left the Bahamas where I spent time with my sons and found a new place in the U.S. It would have been nice to enjoy a little more vacation, but it's also bad to disturb my son and his wife too much, and besides, the U.S. is where I feel most at ease. However, after 40 years of marriage, my heart felt like it had a hole in it. I have recently been volunteering 3 days a week at a nearby nursing home. At 65 years old, I'm completely like a grandma. I used to think so, but there are many seniors at the home who are older than me. When I take care of their meals and accompany them on walks, I can't help but wonder if this is how it would have been if my mother were alive. The elderly at the home are not all physically disabled. Some of them are much healthier than I am. Sophia, you're still young, so don't give up. I've been divorced 3 times myself. Grandma Mary, a resident who will turn 80 this year, chuckled and said that. How was it to get divorced 3 times? Well, you see, I've never been bored in my life. You see, everything in life is orchestrated by a higher power. You can overcome difficult and painful things. So, Sophia, you mustn't give up. Age really does bring wisdom and experience. Mary's comforting words touched me deeply, bringing tears to my eyes. It made me think maybe I should try to enjoy life a bit more. Yeah, that's what I thought.
My husband left with a young woman 10 years ago. He appears at our daughter's wedding but scurries out from embarrassment.
At 22, I married my first boyfriend, against my parents' wishes. The man was a terrible womanizer and philanderer, and left my daughter and me 10 years ago. That man was invited to my daughter's wedding. To me, he was a stranger, but to my daughter, he was her biological father, so I had to accept it. However, her actions on the wedding day were something unexpected. My name is Beth, 47 years old. My only daughter, who will turn 25 this spring, is getting married. Since my husband left 10 years ago, I've raised her alone. I truly wish for her happiness. I got married at the age of 22. My father ran a mid-sized hospital, and I was the only daughter of a wealthy family. From kindergarten through college, I attended private all-girls schools. After graduating from college, I worked in hospital administration through my father's connections. In other words, I was a sheltered child with no immunity to men. When you hear sheltered child, you might imagine a delicate girl, but in my youth, I was just a plain-looking, slightly overweight girl. The first time I went drinking when I was invited by my boss, I stepped into a club for the first time. I was holding a non-alcoholic drink and looking out of place when a staff member named Jordan approached me.
Non-alcoholic, eh? Can't drink alcohol? Should I make you an easy-to-drink cocktail?
Casually spoken to, I blushed, even though I hadn't drunk any alcohol. Blonde with piercings, a handsome face, and a slim figure. To me, who lacked any immunity, he seemed like a celebrity.
This is new. I think I like you. Can I have your number?
With him staring intently at me, I was already elated and exchanged numbers in a daze. The means of contact then was through the newly sold mobile phone. I knew he was somewhat of a playboy, but I didn't mind, because it was the first time I had fallen in love. Whenever Jordan contacted me, I would dress up as much as I can before going out. Jordan taught me about a world I never knew. Looking back, it was just a shabby bar or a small amusement park, but when we first kissed, I thought I would pass out from lack of oxygen. My head buzzed and I felt dizzy. There were many times I wanted to give myself over, but each time I would remember my parents worrying. "We won't do such things until we're married." I rejected his approach, but Jordan didn't get angry or sulk. Instead, he said,
"Man, you really are a serious girl."
And I felt for him more as he smiled. At the time, I thought he didn't force me because he loved me, but now that I think of it, it was probably because he had other women he was seeing. Every time we met, I noticed a different sense of perfume, but I never confronted him about it. I was afraid of his response. And then one day after a long kiss, Jordan said,
"Okay, let's get married."
It was right after he found out my family was wealthy, but blinded by love, I believed he had chosen me for me. At that time, I was still 22. Jordan was 26. It had been half a year since we started dating. At that time, Jordan was a part-timer, hopping from one nightlife job to another, and my parents were completely against the relationship. It was natural for my parents to oppose it, but I couldn't see it in the midst of being in love. For the first time in my life, I defied my parents. "Even if you decide to disown me, I will marry him." I was too stubborn that my parents must have given up.
"There won't be money for the wedding or reception coming from us,"
my father declared. I didn't care about that. As long as I could marry Jordan and live with him, I was happy. When we went to submit our marriage registration, Jordan gave me a ring. It was a ring that a high school student could buy with part-time money, but to me, it seemed like the most precious treasure in the world. Our new home together was Jordan's small one-bedroom apartment, but I was happy thinking we could always be together. I had vaguely thought that I would become a housewife after marriage, but our financial situation didn't allow it, so I continued to work. Jordan also continued working as a bartender, but since it was a part-time job, his salary wasn't enough for the two of us. Since he always came home late at night, I was always sleep-deprived, staying up and waiting for him to return every night. Half a year after registering our marriage, I became pregnant.
"Hey, your breasts have gotten bigger, eh?"
As the months of pregnancy passed, my body changed. Even I was surprised at how much my breasts had grown. However, as I began to show,
"Honestly, thinking there's a living thing inside of that, I can't,"
Jordan said and started avoiding me. I was shocked that he looked at me as if I were some creepy creature. At that time, I misunderstood that being desired physically was love.
"I'll do it elsewhere since I can't go all out if I have to worry about your body."
Elsewhere? Does that mean with another woman? That's cheating, right? I couldn't articulate it well.
"But it can't be helped, right? It's because you got pregnant."
Whose child do you think this is?
"Should we break up then? I'm fine with that if you want to."
I couldn't believe he could say such things. Despite pushing through with the marriage against opposition, I could never tell my parents that we ended up divorcing as soon as I got pregnant. No way divorce is not an option.
"Then you'll just have to cope with it. It isn't such a big deal. It's like using a public toilet because the one at home is broken. Can't help it and need to release,"
Jordan said, laughing, but I didn't find it the least bit funny. Even as a metaphor, it was too harsh. Faced with the choice of either divorcing or accepting the cheating, I had no choice but to accept the latter. At least at that time, I couldn't think of anything else. The ones most delighted by my pregnancy were my parents.
"I'm so happy we see our grandchild's face so soon,"
my mother said happily.
"So if you're having a child, you'll need to live in a proper place and work in a proper job. I'll introduce Jordan to one."
On the condition that Jordan gets a job at one of the companies my father introduced, he provided the down payment for a bigger apartment.
"It was money originally saved up for your marriage fund,"
my mother informed me. Jordan, through my father's introduction, became a salesman for a medical device manufacturer. Now the 3-bedroom apartment was affordable enough that I could quit my job.
Having a wealthy parents-in-law is the best. I'm glad I didn't leave you.
Jordan seemed happy as he said that, and sales, which required quick action, seemed to suit him. Our child was a girl, and we named her Emily. Jordan doted on his daughter, who resembled him, and I think he was a kind father. However, perhaps it was bad that I was so engrossed in childcare. Gradually, Jordan lost interest in me, and before I knew it, I was no longer his lover or a wife, but merely a mother. Jordan was always unfaithful, but I never nagged him about it. Even if he was cheating, he never stayed but overnight and came home every day, so I continued to tell myself that I'm his wife and a mother, so it's okay. Jordan seemed to be a successful salesman, earning a good salary, and my parents, ever eager to spend on their granddaughter, even bought a car for us, saying it should be necessary for her kindergarten commutes. From the outside, we must have appeared a wealthy and happy family. Then one time, my daughter, now in her second year of middle school, told me, "Hey, Mom, I saw Dad downtown on my way back from school. He was walking arm in arm with a young and beautiful woman." Suddenly confronted with what I had been avoiding, I replied flusteredly, "Oh, really? Maybe it's someone from work." "Absolutely not. Dad's cheating, isn't he? Are you okay with that, Mom?" "Emily, you shouldn't worry about such things." "I will worry. We're family, aren't we?" My daughter's questioning, as she entered her rebellious phase, was something bitter. "Dad, you're cheating, right?" Emily directly asked her father.
What's this about all of a sudden? My Emily's starting saying such things now?
Jordan dodged it, but eventually Emily began ignoring her father and looked at him with disgust whenever they met.
Girls are such a hassle.
At first, Jordan said that, but perhaps feeling uncomfortable, he gradually began spending less time at home. Even though he cheated, he always returned to this house. It was the only thing that kept me sane, but Jordan soon stopped coming home. One night past 8 o'clock, my father called me. Since Jordan had been performing well in sales since my father arranged his job, my father had been more accepting, but now he sounded furious.
"Beth, is Jordan there?"
Actually, Jordan hasn't come home for the past 3 days. I was shocked by the unbelievable story my father told me. Jordan sells medical equipment, so he was frequently at hospitals. There he was flirting with the nurses and even got deeply involved with a female doctor whose husband stormed into my father's company, causing a huge commotion. It seems Jordan has submitted his resignation. My father is furious at having his dignity destroyed.
What's going on with him? Beth, did he know about this?
Everything went dark. I couldn't believe I was hearing this from my father. I don't know anything. I lied. That night, Jordan came home for the first time in 3 days.
I quit my job today. I got into trouble with a client and my boss was so annoying. And I'll be leaving this house too.
Saying this, he quickly packed his belongings and tried to leave. Wait a minute. You can't just say that all of a sudden. Let's calm down and talk this through. Even as I tried to stop him, Jordan wouldn't listen.
I can see that your father will complain, and lately, Emily isn't cute anymore, and being in this house is uncomfortable. Besides, the woman I'm seeing now is still 20, and since I'm her first, she really thinks I'm the one for her. You don't need me here, right?
Earlier in the call, my father had said hurry up and divorce him. You don't love me or your daughter anymore? I was afraid to hear the answer.
The girlfriend I have now, she's like you used to be. Sorry, but honestly, I've been tired of you for a long time.
It doesn't make sense. I don't think marriage is about getting tired of your significant other.
Here, the divorce papers. Fill them out and submit them once you're done.
He handed me the documents he had taken out of his bag. I had thought if it came to divorce, I would be the one to bring it up. At that moment, Emily, who had been in her room, came out and shouted, "You're not my father. Just get out." Jordan shrieked at his father's shouts, opened the front door and left. Emily was crying. "He's the worst. I hate him." Emily. "Mom, why have you not said anything even if you knew he's been cheating all along?" It's because his cheating is like a disease. and I thought it was better not to divorce for your sake." Cutting off my words, Emily said, "Don't use me as an excuse. I hated that you just endure it, thinking that's the best way. Mom, you're not living your own life. I don't want to be like you." Emily's words pierced me. I was shocked, very shocked. Under the protection of my parents, I grew up without any hardships, never facing my husband honestly, always lying to my heart. I was afraid of Jordan leaving, so I tolerated his infidelities. It was natural for my daughter to hate me. I thought I couldn't go on like this. Even if my husband left, if I relied on my parents, we wouldn't struggle financially. But such a mother would not be loved by her daughter. So I decided to study and take the medical billing certification exam, eventually obtaining a qualification. It took 2 years to pass, but it was the first result I achieved through my own efforts. Through my father, I found a job in the billing department of a hospital. In the end, I relied on my parents again, but it was better than working at an unknown hospital without any connections. I thought it was pointless to put on a facade. I had to raise my daughter, and now she's getting married to her college classmate, a rugby player. He seemed attentive and sincere, and at the seats of the bride and groom's parents, there was my husband who had left 10 years ago.
"How dare you show up here?"
My father whispered furiously.
"Well, Emily contacted me. I was properly invited."
My husband, wearing a cheap suit, smiled unashamedly. The older he got, the more he just seemed like a shabby middle-aged man. When I heard that my daughter had invited her father to her wedding, I was surprised. To me, he is a stranger, but to my daughter, he's her father. I couldn't oppose it. Nonetheless, I thought it audacious of him to show up.
"Hey, could you spare some money? I haven't been feeling well recently and can't work much."
He whispered this to me so others couldn't hear. I realized that must have been his purpose for coming, but I didn't respond.
"Hey, we once loved each other, didn't we?"
He shamelessly said that. Why was I so crazy about such a man, I wondered. Unfortunately, I don't care about you anymore. At all. When I said this, he clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. The reception proceeded smoothly, and it came time for the bride and groom to read a letter addressed to their parents. Seeing his daughter in a wedding dress, even my husband seemed a bit moved.
"After all, a blood connection is stronger than a wife who isn't related by blood. Emily is beautiful like me too,"
he said insensitively.
"You never responded to my calls, but Emily invited me like this."
Huh? What are you talking about? I've never received anything from you.
"What? I told Emily though."
As we whispered this exchange, my daughter unfolded a piece of paper and began reading the letter. "Mom, thank you for raising me to this day. Dad cheated with a young woman 10 years ago and left you and me. You've worked so hard to raise me after that." As my daughter suddenly started telling this in her speech, the room buzzed.
"What are you saying in a place like this? After all, she is from a wealthy family, so raising one daughter should be easy, right?"
My shameless husband confronted my daughter like that. No, Mom studied hard, got her qualifications, worked her socks off, and sent me to college. She refused offers to help from Grandpa and Grandma. As for you, you left and never paid a cent in child support. And after breaking up with your young lover, you couldn't find a steady job and struggled with money, and that's why you contacted us, right?
"Stop it, not here."
Even my shameless husband was flustered. I myself actually didn't understand what was happening or what to do either. But I didn't tell Mom anything. I didn't want to see Mom being manipulated by you anymore. Mom's decision of choosing you as a husband was the biggest mistake of her life, but thanks to that, I am here now. Mom didn't submit the divorce papers you left because she didn't want to make me a child of a single parent.
She's just saying that. Reality is that you still have feelings for me. Right, Beth?
Hearing him call me by my name gave me chills. Certainly, it was the biggest mistake of my life. Today is my wedding day, but it's also my parents' divorce day. Mom, please get officially divorced today, and from now on, live for yourself. Thank you for everything up till now. Mom, I love you so much. I couldn't hold in my tears. Applause broke out right next to me. It was my father and mother. Then the groom's parents continued, and gradually applause arose from around us. I'm sorry for doing something so unreasonable. thanks to my husband and his parents who approved in advance. My daughter bowed as she said this. Looking at the groom's parents, they both nodded in understanding. My husband stood up uncomfortably from his seat and fled the venue as if escaping. Later, during the bouquet toss, my daughter handed me a piece of paper. "Here, Mom. This is your ticket to freedom," she said, smiling. It was the divorce papers my husband had left behind 10 years ago. After that, my ex-husband collapsed from liver damage due to his unhealthy lifestyle and was admitted to a hospital managed by my father. When the hospital billed him, he protested, shouting,
"I'm the son-in-law of the director of ABC Hospital."
So my father received a call, and that's how we learned of this fact.
Him being a son-in-law was a thing of the past. We are now complete strangers, so please direct him to appropriate assistance,
my father said and hung up the phone.
"Is this what you wanted?"
my father asked, and I nodded. I can't afford to make any more mistakes. I'll never be involved with that man again. I don't know how many women he's been with, but it seems none stayed by his side. Now that my daughter has married and moved out, living alone in a 3-bedroom apartment is a bit lonely. From now on, live for yourself. My daughter's words echoed in my mind. If I live to the average life expectancy, I still have about 30 years to live. I plan not to hold back on doing what I like and want to do. Maybe I'll start dating again? Living with a pet might be nice too. I'd like to try volunteering as well. But first, maybe I'll invite my parents to a trip together. I would like to tell my parents I love them too.
Disbelieved by my husband, I showed a year's proof of MIL's bullying at Christmas. My kid's reaction was priceless. Lol.
No way my mom would bully you.
My husband, no matter how many times I try to explain, just won't believe me. And the harassment continues today. I've decided I can't rely on my useless husband. I need to handle this myself. The evidence I've painstakingly gathered will come to light at the family gathering. Just you wait. My name is Marie. I'm a stay-at-home mom in my 30s, married for 5 years. My family includes my husband, Steven, an office worker, and our 2 sons, ages 4 and 2. I became a stay-at-home mom because Steve wanted someone to be home. His company decided to expand nationwide at the start of the year, leading to an out-of-state relocation. Normally, I would have moved with them. However, there was a possibility of further relocations. So, at Steven's suggestion, I moved in with his mother along with our 2 kids. It matched Steven's desire not to leave his mom alone. Living with 2 young boys, I thought maybe my mother-in-law's help wouldn't be so bad. Her place is about a 30-minute drive from our apartment. Steven's dad has passed away, leaving Irene, my mother-in-law, living alone in a house with plenty of room. Considering the kids are both young, it seemed easier to manage childcare with her around. We're not particularly close, but we get along fine. We only meet on the 4th of July and Christmas, but she's always been sweet to the kids. I thought we could get along living together. After a while, Steven moved for his job, leaving the kids and me behind. Irene was kind to us after we moved in. It's so nice to have the grandkids around. The house feels livelier instantly. However, her kindness campaign lasted only a week. She started showing her true colors, which even I hadn't seen before. Irene began muttering, "Aren't the kids waking up too early? I wanted to sleep a bit more. It's inconsiderate, especially with an elderly person around." I had no choice but to apologize. But my eldest son has to go to preschool and we need to get ready in the mornings. I try not to bother Irene, whispering to the kids, "Grandma's sleeping, so let's be quiet," and making sure they didn't run around too much. But avoiding noise entirely was impossible. Living alone before, even the sound of daily life began to bother Irene. Yet, after another week, she seemed to get used to it and stopped getting up early. Just when I thought things were settling down, she started complaining about everything. She just was not happy with anything. And her daily ritual became declaring, "The food is awful." I prepared meals for her along with ours, since we got up earlier. You're feeding this to the kids? It's tasteless. Here we go. I had to respond. The kids think it's delicious and they eat it. But Irene retorted, Well, of course! They've grown accustomed to this taste since birth. You come from a place where you don't need to season your food. Must be nice. Just claim it's the natural flavor of the ingredients. As if there's a place that doesn't season its food. For the record, I'm from the next state over. Irene would complain, but always finished her plate. Despite her complaints about the food, she hardly did any housework herself. When I talked to Stephen about it, he replied,
You're living together. It's just one more person. You can handle it.
He added,
You're home all day anyway. You have the time.
This living arrangement seemed to have been a hasty decision. Even I, slow to catch on, realized Irene was more than a bit mean. She loves picking on the vulnerable, like a cat with a mouse. With the restraint of living in her house, not wanting to retaliate, Irene's bullying gradually escalated. When the mail arrived in the afternoon, Irene was gossiping with a neighbor at the front door. Ever since my daughter-in-law and the grandkids moved in, the house is a mess. She doesn't clean, cooks terribly, lazes around all day. A real disappointment. She did manage to have kids, though. Her lazy family makes easy money, so I worry that lazy gene has passed down to my grandkids. What? All lies! What's this about a lazy family and lazy gene? That's rich coming from her. My family has a stable income from apartment rentals. Maybe she's insinuating we're making easy money off rent. That's ridiculous. I clean every day. Sure, toys get scattered, but the place is much cleaner now than before we arrived. Irene really does nothing. Occasionally, she sneaks snacks meant for the kids, unfazed even if it makes them cry. Elderly people need their energy. Kids don't get hungry if they play. Conveniently elderly only when it suits her. Once, when I had to receive an unexpected delivery in my loungewear, Irene remarked, Look at you! How shameful! Your hometown must be full of people walking around butt naked. She must think my hometown is like the Stone Age. The delivery, of course, was for Irene. She could have gotten it herself. Then, when I was exhausted from daily chores and childcare, falling ill, I told her, Irene, I'm not feeling well, so I'm gonna lie down for a bit. And rested on the couch. The kids played in the yard, watched by Irene. A neighbor, noticing, started a conversation. That's unusual. Just you and the grandkids today? Where's your daughter-in-law? Irene replied, That daughter-in-law of mine is so lazy, lying on the couch right now. She's from a village where everyone naps after eating, so our busy life doesn't suit her. That's why I'm looking after my sweet grandkids. Maybe you should tell your son to have a word with her. Oh, I've told him. I keep saying I'll send her back to her remote village if she doesn't shape up. I'm keeping an eye on her and reporting to my son. Such pleasure in spreading lies as gossip. I, feeling under the weather, had to swallow my anger. Later, when Stephen finally came home, I told him everything. Your mom's treatment of me is terrible. Can you say something to her? Stephen, unchanging in expression, replied,
No way my mom would bully you. You're living there, so show some consideration. Mom's probably just lonely without dad around. Try to be nicer.
I don't know what happened, but she's a kind-hearted person. You must have done something to upset her. If you have a complaint, feel free to leave. That is, if you think you can manage without my income. He was utterly dismissive. Irene, for her part, played the sweet old lady in front of Stephen. Even to me, she was all sweet talk. I finally realized that talking to this man about the issue was futile. To think my husband would turn out to be so unreliable. In the neighborhood, thanks to my mother-in-law's fabrications, I've become the lazy daughter-in-law who just showed up one day. When I take the kids to the nearby park, I notice the local women whispering and glancing my way. I overheard one saying, "I heard she bosses her mother-in-law around. She even points the remote at her as if trying to operate her to move." I couldn't help but laugh a little. If only I actually had a remote like that, I'd love to try it out. Moreover, Irene has been calling all the relatives, spreading nasty rumors about me. I never should have allowed him to marry a girl from such a barbaric place. Though most relatives believe her lies, there was one who stood by me. A cousin around my age, worried, reached out to me. "I heard you're being called the lazy daughter-in-law by everyone. Is that true?" "Of course not. It's just exaggerated. It's 100% false." As if I come from some Stone Age village. "I see. But it's gonna be a problem when all the relatives gather at family parties." "Yes, if the relatives gather, they'll likely give me cold stares and Irene will revel in it. I'm gonna reset this life." I resolved to carefully plan my strategy to make her deeply regret her treatment of me. Then Christmas arrived. This time of year surely brings hope. At Christmas, all the relatives come together, even those from my late father-in-law's side. Having bought into Irene's propaganda, they all looked at me coldly. Even though they take the Stone Age clan bit as a joke, they fully believe the lazy daughter-in-law part. I can't understand this logic at all. "Why don't you try to be a bit more diligent with the household chores? You're living there after all. You should show some consideration for your mother-in-law." And so on. I just smiled in response. "I'll try harder." Their faces tensed up, but oh well, only for now. I'm a really bad daughter-in-law, far worse than they think. Irene said, "I really do wish you'd show me some consideration." When I mentioned I'd drive to the station to pick up my husband, Irene decided to come along. She adores her son so much, she wouldn't dare criticize me in front of him. But today, I'm gonna show my husband the monster's true form. I asked my cousin to watch the kids, and Irene and I set off for the station. Along the way, she did nothing but criticize me. "Marie, you're really bad at planning. You knew we had guests coming today. You should have started preparing earlier." She expects me to do everything, basically. And if I actually got up early to prepare, she'd complain about the noise. But today, I couldn't care less. I'm looking forward to what's coming. Seeing my smirk, Stephen said,
Aw, you two look like you're getting along.
What a misguided fool. I was looking forward to his return, not because I missed him, but for other reasons. Irene greeted her son with a smile, saying, "I've prepared your favorite dishes. You're home, so make yourself comfortable." Once we were all in the car, he suggested, "Shall we play some music?" Perfect timing. I had prepared a CD for Stephen, who always listens to CDs in the car. When I hit play, it wasn't fun music that started. Irene was heard saying, "Marie, your cooking is really terrible. Sweet or spicy, I can understand, but tasteless? If you were a bit more competent, it'd be easier for me. Go back to the countryside. Have fun living there, grunting away like a barbaric animal. You are so sloppy." Here, wrapping yourself in animal skins is apparently not fine.
Stephen's face went pale. What's this? Are you practicing for a play? I said,
Unfortunately, this is real. This is your mother. She loves to bully her daughter-in-law. It's like her hobby, so she probably won't stop.
Mom, you say this kind of stuff every day?
No, that's not true. I don't say it that often, do I? She glared at me. Oh, how the tables had turned. I wasn't bothered by anything she said. Upon arriving home, Irene seemed a bit relieved, but the best was yet to come. As soon as Irene entered, the relatives came bustling in.
Oh, there's this weird DVD playing.
Irene, puzzled, went, What?
Actually, the grandkids said there's a funny DVD we should watch.
Irene and Stephen rushed to the living room to see what was on the screen. It showed Irene. Of course, I had set up a camera and microphone. She was mumbling to the photo of her late husband, as usual. The part about mocking my family seemed to be over, but there was more to come. She was heard saying, I agreed to accept her because you said she was a good daughter-in-law, but she's insolent and hopeless. You probably just liked that a young girl was smiling at you. You have no judgment. Oh, and the grandkids are so ill-mannered. They spill food, stain my clothes. They have no discipline. I would have preferred girls instead of 2 boys. It wasn't just about me and the grandkids. She even talked about the relatives present. Really, your siblings never make any sense. They laugh too loud at things that aren't funny, lacking in class. That's probably why they couldn't get into a decent company. And she didn't stop at family. She gossiped about neighbors too. That lady from next door, she just talks too much. The daughter-in-law next door is no help either. She's just like Marie. Irene turned pale and quickly removed the DVD from the player. The title written on it was No Longer There, Season 1. I had recorded the footage on camera, compiled it onto a DVD, and gave it a drama-like title so its contents wouldn't be immediately obvious if found. The No Longer There series goes up to Season 10. Before leaving to pick up my husband, I had handed the DVD to my eldest son saying, If you're bored, you can put this on. Sure enough, he told the relatives to play it. Watching the screen, my son grinned and said, Hey, is that Grandma? The relatives confronted Irene, asking, What's this? Irene stammered, well? At that moment, my sons chimed in. Grandma, you were on TV! That's so cool! It's just like yesterday's show! Yesterday? I wondered, puzzled. Yeah, the one with the police cars. My son explained. Ah, the detective show from yesterday, I realized. The scene where the criminal confesses looked similar to this. I remembered an actress around Irene's age playing the culprit and couldn't help but burst out laughing. Irene, having watched the same TV show, seemed to understand the reference and had a complicated look on her face. My son excitedly asked, Isn't this cool? Can I give it to my friends? He probably wanted to brag about his grandma becoming a celebrity. Irene's scream filled the air. Please, don't do that. Smiling sweetly, I said, Maybe we'll give it to the uncles then. And handed out DVDs to all the relatives. They accepted them with mixed feelings. My son also asked, Can I give one to Sally next door? Sure. We greet the grandpa across the street often, so why not share it with him too? Irene panicked. Wait, no. If you do that, I won't be able to show my face in this house. Oh, so you knew you were saying awful things, I remarked coldly. But to the neighbors and relatives, this is just gossip. I've been facing these comments directly. I might have come off a bit strong. It's unbearable for the person on the receiving end, and to criticize my children as well? Irene pleaded. I'm sorry, Marie. Please forgive me. Even Stephen joined in.
Marie, please forgive her.
As if it were that simple. I glared at him sharply, making him flinch. See? I can be quite scary. You never believed me, did you? I then presented him with a completed divorce form. You said I could leave if I had complaints, so I will. He was shocked.
What? I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'll talk to Mom.
I've reached my limit long ago. Leaving the stunned relatives behind, I took the kids and left the house. I had prepared to take our essentials with us. Moreover, as a Christmas greeting, my cousin distributed the infamous DVDs around the neighborhood. My children and I took refuge in my parents' home. After some discussions through a lawyer, we successfully finalized the divorce. I decided not to ask for alimony, considering my revenge successful. Initially, Stephen pleaded,
It was my fault. Let's start over. I can cut ties with Mom. Eventually, we can put her in a nursing home so she won't be able to trouble you anymore.
But he only apologized once. Well, he is his mother's son after all. I didn't need his apology or his income. My parents had transferred several apartments to me. Even amidst childcare, I had been managing to earn a steady income. The apartments were more valuable to me than a husband who didn't appreciate his wife. Of course, earning rental income isn't as easy as it seems. I'm quite busy myself. Now, with my ex-husband's solo relocation over, he and Irene seem to be living quietly, enduring the cold stares from those around them. Irene, who once spread rumors about me in the neighborhood, now seems to be a recluse. The DVD gossip spread, and it appears no one wants to associate with her anymore. She's probably still ranting about me to her late husband's photo, but I'm no longer there, and I couldn't care less. These days, I'm enjoying peaceful days, supported by my parents and raising my children.
My husband ignored our daughter's B-day for a trip with his niece. I called him unfit. He snapped and declared divorce. Then our daughter,
I'm going on a family trip with my sister this weekend.
I couldn't believe my ears as my husband Steve casually mentioned. Really, Steve? You're always visiting your niece on weekends. Even missing our daughter's field trip, an open house, and now a trip? And today of all days, it's our daughter's birthday. That's it. I won't forgive this. I'll make sure you understand the value of the family you've been neglecting. My name is June, and I'm 40 years old. My parents named me after the month I was born in and the month they met. I absolutely adore my name because it's filled with heartwarming stories about my parents, who are still close. My story today goes back to when I was in my 30s. At that time, I was pregnant with our child and in the middle of enjoying my maternity life. Steve was kind, and both my parents and in-laws were there to help. So other than morning sickness, I didn't have much to struggle with and lived happily and peacefully. One day, my sister-in-law and her husband, who had been working overseas for many years, finished a long-term project and decided to return home. They hadn't come home for Christmas, and I hadn't seen them since our wedding. However, I remembered them as friendly and kind people. They planned to visit their parents this Christmas, and I was excited about getting to know them more. When I met them, my sister-in-law introduced their daughter. This is Karen. Nice to meet you. Karen, the little niece I had only seen in pictures, was born while her parents were on the business assignment abroad. She inherited her father's strikingly well-defined features and was an adorable girl. Her slightly light-colored, naturally curly hair also emphasized her cuteness. Seeing the 2-year-old shyly hiding behind her mother, and fidgeting. It was no surprise that she instantly stole my heart. She's so cute, I thought to myself. Glancing at Steve, I noticed his eyes practically turning into hearts. He was completely smitten. He stuck close to Karen throughout the visit. Karen, initially shy, gradually began to trust Steve, which made him adore her even more. He even wanted to put her to sleep, prompting me to say, "You should really leave that to your sister or her husband." I thought about how shocked she might be when she grew up and learned that her uncle had fallen asleep next to her. Steve seemed dissatisfied with my intervention. I felt he was maybe a bit too doting, but Karen's cuteness was an irresistible force. I was sure once our child was born, he would dote on them just as much, if not more. Watching him adore Karen made me feel tender towards him. But after my sister-in-law's family moved near us, Steve started acting strangely. He began having meals with them once a week, mainly to see Karen. Initially, I joined them, but as my pregnancy progressed and my condition became unstable, I started to attend less frequently. Nevertheless, Steve continued to visit their home to enjoy meals with Karen, regardless of rain or wind. I once casually asked my sister-in-law, "Isn't it a bother?" But she welcomed the extra help with Karen. I figured it was fine since she was okay with it, but I couldn't help feeling a bit disgusted by Steve's desperate focus on Karen. He was neglecting his pregnant wife to spend time at his sister's house. Who is more important to you, your child or your niece? I thought, trying to suppress my rising emotions. Maybe I'm just being overly emotional because of the pregnancy. I tried to convince myself. However, one morning Steve said he needed to take the day off work. When I asked why, he said, "Karen has a fever, and I want to take care of her." That's his sister's job, I thought. Despite having a pregnant wife, he wanted to care for his sick niece. I confronted him. "Don't you think you're being a bit too doting? I mean, Karen is adorable, and I get it, but you know how careful I'm being to avoid becoming sick, right?" Steve scoffed. "You're being silly. Are you jealous of Karen?" "It's not about that. It's about managing risks. If you catch her cold and then I catch it, it could affect our unborn baby." "It's just a cold." "Then Karen probably just has a cold too." "You're cold-hearted to trivialize a child's illness." I realized we were getting nowhere. He didn't understand at all and seemed to care only about Karen's well-being. Frustrated, I told him to do what he wanted, and he actually took the day off and rushed to his sister's house. Eventually, his sister, struggling with her own cold, sent him home, saying he was just being a nuisance. The real problem began after that. As expected, Steve brought the cold virus home from his sister's house. First, he got a mild cold, which I then caught. Unable to take medication, I suffered a lot. Steve seemed to feel guilty and actually said, "I was careless, I'm sorry." But he hadn't shown the same urgency to get remedies for me as he had for Karen. He just said, "Rest and you'll recover." I couldn't help but notice the difference in how he treated Karen and me. Was it because I was an adult? But I was pregnant. They say a wife always remembers the resentment she felt toward her husband during pregnancy and childbirth. And indeed, this incident cast a long shadow over my heart. I gave birth to our daughter shortly after. My sister's family moved overseas again for a project they had been working on before returning. Steve was initially saddened by not being able to see Karen, but he began doting on our daughter, Lisa. Maybe he just loved kids, and now that we had our own child, he would lavish the same affection on her. I felt reassured and committed to cherishing our family home with Steve and Lisa. However, when our daughter turned 5, my sister-in-law's family ended their long stint abroad and moved back near us. And so the nightmare began again. Steve, who had been doting on Lisa, switched back to doting on an 8-year-old Karen. He would visit his sister's house almost every day after work to play with her for a couple of hours, and spent weekends with her family, even covering all her expenses. I thought my sister-in-law might find this too much, but it turned out she tolerated it because Steve was paying. How far would he go? Prioritizing his niece over his own child was problematic enough, but it was also straining our finances. The rebound from their time apart made Steve's indulgence in Karen even more intense. My frustration grew, leading to more fights with him, and I even started considering divorce. Would it be better for Lisa to have her father around or not, if he favored his niece over her? I continued to wrestle with these thoughts. Then one day, Steve blurted out,
"I'm going on a family trip with my sister this weekend."
"Huh? This weekend is Lisa's birthday." He nonchalantly said,
"We can celebrate it later."
"What? Later? Did you just say later?"
"Is there a problem with that?"
He retorted casually, which was the last straw for me. "You didn't even come to Lisa's track meet last month. You're failing as a father. Who is more important to you, your niece or your daughter?"
"Don't be dramatic. I love them both."
"Then start acting like it and prioritize your daughter's events too. Which child is actually yours?"
"Why am I being scolded? I treat them both equally."
"That's exactly why I'm saying this. You're not treating them equally."
Enough already. I'm done with this conversation."
"If you keep this up, you'll never truly value your daughter."
"How have I not valued her?" "You're just imagining things."
We both accused each other of being wrong, and the discussion went nowhere, only heating up our anger. Eventually, Steve exploded.
"I can't stand a woman who just nags incessantly. I want a divorce."
"Fine by me. Call me whatever you want. If you don't value your daughter, maybe it's better if you're not around." I felt a sudden clarity. At that moment, Lisa remarked with a surprisingly mature tone, "Ugh, men, they're always like this." Both Steve and I couldn't believe what we were hearing. "They can't do anything unless a woman supports them. They act tough on impulse and regret it later." It felt like she was speaking against the backdrop of a bar. Was I imagining things? Steve was stunned into silence. "Thinking you can intimidate a woman by mentioning divorce? That's pathetic." Wait a minute. Where have I heard that line before? Her words had unexpectedly struck a critical blow to Steve, who stood there dumbfounded. "Divorce? Go ahead. It's not like I'm begging you to stay." Her bold statement continued as he began to tear up.
"Lisa?"
he stammered as he staggered toward our daughter. "A man who doesn't appreciate his wife's support is no good. You think you're so important, don't you?" Lisa scolded. Honestly, I hadn't thought that far, but her words seemed like someone else's complaints, not just her own. Where had she learned such phrases? Then it hit me. Those were the exact words my mother-in-law had used in a drunken rant about my father-in-law during their fight that led to their divorce. This talk by Lisa mirrored that argument of theirs. Apparently, she was recreating the scene between my in-laws. Unaware, Steve thought she was speaking her true feelings.
"Sweetheart, I was wrong,"
he muttered, looking defeated. As he appeared more dejected than I expected, I tried to get her to stop her role-playing, remembering that I had been the one to intervene during my in-laws' argument. It seemed like just a game to her. Gosh, what should I do? She's currently in a phase where if she gets hooked on a game, she'll repeat it over and over. Just recently, she had me impersonate a popular comedian countless times. Eventually, Lisa tired of blaming her father and switched topics. "By the way, Dad, Karen was saying the other day."
"Karen?"
Steve perked up, surprised by the sudden change. "Yeah, she thinks you have no taste in toys."
"What?"
"She's 8 now and doesn't want stuffed animals anymore."
"Oh."
"She said you're just pushing kindness." Whether she understood the meaning of the words or not, he turned pale as both his niece and daughter seemed to betray him. I couldn't help but laugh, saying, "Girls grow up fast, don't they?" The phrase pushing kindness was quite apt. He slumped to the ground, deflated.
"I thought I was doing something good."
"Well, people who push their kindness often think that."
"You don't have to say it like that."
He looked at me, his earlier defiance gone. "I kind of feel sorry for you. But what was it again? You wanted a divorce, right?"
Well, that was just in the heat of the moment,"
he stammered. Even in the heat of the moment, there are things you should and shouldn't say. Saying divorce so quickly means you must have thought. I'm right, and if you don't agree, we're done.
Well,
I don't think I can make it work with someone like that. Besides, after all the fuss over your niece, I can't see your feelings suddenly changing. If anything, you'll probably dip into our savings next time to buy her a better toy. My spur-of-the-moment guess hit home, and he fell silent. Yep, divorce seems like the right choice. There's no fixing this. You'll agree to the divorce, right?
yes.
He agreed. Thus, our divorce was settled. I made sure to explain to Lisa what divorce meant, in case she didn't understand. If she had objected, I would have considered her wishes. However, Lisa casually said, "Dad's hardly home anyway. He's like an uncle I sometimes see. I don't mind." Indeed, Lisa, who went to bed early, rarely saw Steve during the week due to his late returns from visiting Karen, and they barely spoke. Moreover, he spent his weekends with Karen and missed our family events. Ultimately, Lisa probably felt like she was already in a single-parent home. Given that, I felt no hesitation in signing the divorce papers, and although a still distressed Steve hoped for a reconciliation until the end, I firmly refused, knowing he was still indulging his niece with gifts. His affection for his niece seemed incurable, like a chronic illness. Rebuilding our marriage was never an option. It took Steve a while to come to terms with it, but eventually we divorced and Lisa and I began a new life. Meanwhile, Steve was heavily criticized by both his sister and mother for the divorce caused by his overindulgence in his niece. His sister-in-law scolded him. "You better reflect on your actions," and even forbade him from seeing Karen. Karen was entering her sensitive preteen years, typically when kids start disliking their parents, but it seemed she was becoming slightly annoyed with Steve, which turned out to be a good thing. Despite all his doing, she had quickly taken a dislike to him. My mother-in-law apologized to me and my daughter, saying,
I'm so sorry. My son has caused you trouble.
but I reassured her that honestly, he was the only one at fault, and I told her not to worry about it. 4 years have passed since then. Steve still hasn't been allowed to see Karen, and my daughter doesn't want to see him either. Both seem to dislike him. He seems to accept his situation as just consequences, and appears to be reflecting on his actions. As for my daughter and me, she's now a happy elementary school student with more friends and enjoyable days. Starting school during the pandemic meant she had to wear masks, which made it hard for her to read her classmates' expressions, and sometimes she would cry because she couldn't understand their feelings. However, as I continued to support her by listening to her problems and walking her to school, she gradually gained confidence and courage. Now her teacher even says she's the most cheerful one. Recently, she started attending swimming school, and seems to be making steady friends there too. As for her swimming skills, well, they're still pretty bad. Maybe she inherited that from me. Maybe I should start taking swimming lessons myself. Since we're family, I hope we can support and help each other improve in both our strengths and weaknesses. I want to be more of a friend than just a mother to her. Incidentally, her friends say I look like a pretty older sister, which makes me glad. I've put so much effort into my appearance. But my daughter tells me, "You're middle-aged." And when I scold her for her comments, she retorts, "But you really are middle-aged, aren't you?" I wonder when she became so articulate. Well, her quick wit was a big help during that time. Our relationship is full of lively banter, and we live happily every day. Initially, I was anxious about becoming a single mother, and as a former housewife, I struggled to find work. Fortunately, thanks to a friend referral system at a friend's company, I landed a job at a major call center. The company aims to improve women's positions and is very understanding of parenting and single mothers, allowing someone like me to become a supervisor and train other employees. In the past, employment and management positions for single mothers were scarce. Although there's still room for improvement, I feel that the work environment for women has gotten better. Some of my subordinates are single parents, so I'm motivated to make their work life easier too. I strive to balance family and work impressively, aiming to be a mother my daughter can look up to. I'm determined to keep pushing forward.